Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. I don't know why, but I'm just really excited to work in this book and show you how I'm going to tackle some of the pages in here to hopefully put some emphasis on some small but very important images. I'm also excited to use a new medium for me, and I am going to try my hand at oil pastels to hopefully create more solid, smoother backgrounds. All right, and so here's my little disclaimer about this video. I am not saying that there is a right way or a wrong way to color in your coloring books. They are your books. You can do whatever you want with them. I'm just sharing my thought process and how I want to approach these pages, hoping you will find some inspiration for your coloring books. Feel free to fast forward to the coloring section of this video if really all you want to see is coloring. Okay, so the illustrations in this book I find unique in these ways. And I'm going to flip through a few pages so you can get an understanding. All right, so the title of the book is Fairies in Dreamland, right? So, but the most important thing, the fairies, you would think, kind of disappear with all the other things to look at. Like if you look at this page, I think my eye kind of starts here and then slowly moves up to the birds, and then here's the fairy's wings and this other bird. I think she really gets lost in all of those. Yeah, and it's kind of the same on a lot of the other pages too. The fairy herself is drawn very thin, almost delicate, which is what you would expect for fairies, but can be challenging to color. So when you look closely at them, they almost have this, I don't know what decade I'm thinking of, maybe like 50s or 40s, kind of that cartoon pinup girl look with the big lips and the big eyes and the kind of big hair. Yeah, I find them very whimsical and fun. And look how pretty like the hands and the feet are. They almost take on like a leaf shape. So even though the most of them have kind of these sleeping poses, they are still kind of curvy, and then the wings kind of take on their own element too. They have pretty flower tops and a leaf skirt, but all just very small. So the flowers, the leaves, and the pillows, and the blankets, some of these elements are very simple, kind of straightforward line art, but others, can have a little bit thicker lines in them. And then, just with all the blankets, there's just a lot of lines, a lot of things going on. So with that being said, I never really gravitated towards this book. I've seen a lot of flips and completed pages, but it wasn't until I watched the YouTube colorist, A Cluttered Life, that I saw the pictures in a new light. I felt like she had a good balance of beautiful color palettes and unique backgrounds, but nothing really took away from the fairies. Instead of searching for the fairies, I was able to see them and they were kind of highlighted. So a few of her backgrounds, she said she used oil pastels. And I'm always looking for new ways to create more solid looking backgrounds. Never really considered oil pastels. I've used, pan pastels, chalk pastels, distress inks, acrylic paint, and sometimes acrylic paint I get frustrated with the streakiness of it, and then I have to go over it with color pencil. So seeing some of her backgrounds done in oil pastels, I was definitely wanting to give that a try. All right, I also looked up information on the illustrator, Denyse Klette, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right. She has all sorts of beautiful, very colorful works of art, and she is also an official Disney fine art artist. So what makes me really gravitate towards these colorings in art, and how can I apply what I like to my own visions of the page? So this is how I'm going to tackle some of these pages to hopefully highlight these little fairies. All right, so let me show you a practice page I did and that I followed kind of the concept that I'm going to be talking about. So this is the name page. All right, so I'm thinking that contrast is going to be the key. So bold, kind of darker backgrounds, and I did do this in the oil pastel. I did have to spray it with fixative, and that seemed to work pretty good, but I actually like the way the page feels better than I do like the acrylic paint. It's not like crunchy and wrinkly, so that's a plus. All right, not meaning it always has to be nighttime. I mean, it can be, and it doesn't have to be, but I just like the idea of more of a solid background. Minimal color palette, 3 to 5 colors. So on here, I just have light pink, dark pink, kind of that golden yellow color. Blue, obviously, for the background. And if you want to count some of the peach colors for like the wood or her skin tone, that can be a color too. Simple coloring and shading. So I'm not really focused on any of the Zen doodles. Not that there was much on this page anyway, but just a very simple shading. So kind of a light to dark shading pattern. And then definitely using paint pens for any of these. There were some little Zen doodle dangly things along here. So I used paint pens for those tiny little areas. And then some type of glow and fairy dust around the fairy. So this kind of helps draw your eye over to her. And then the pillows and blankets, I want to do more of a color wash. It keeps it very light, you know, more like linens, what you would think of linens, and just low saturation. Again, this is also a nice contrast with the dark background. The wings, I also want to keep very light. This one I used a white paint pen outlined around, and then I also used a sparkly glitter pen to kind of go over that, and just very lightly shaded. So I think all of that helps with the contrast and kind of helps focus your eye on the important part, the fairy. So yeah, I think it turned out good. I also did a little bit of a glow effect around these flowers, but I'm not sure if it needed that much glow or not. Here, I will bring it up closer so you can see, hopefully see some of that glitter in there. Okay, so that is how I'm going to approach these pages. I'm going to find a page to do and do a page for you so you can see the process. Okay, so I've picked this page, and since the illustrator does some Disney art, I'm going to find inspiration from one of her paintings of Tinkerbell. I'm definitely doing this type of a starry night sky. I like that slightly lighter band of blue in the middle. I also really like the blue, teal, and green flowers against that blue sky. So I'll be doing some real-time coloring, and I usually end up speeding up the video or doing some off camera. That way you can see the finished page at the end. I'm going to be using Ohuhu Alcohol markers as a base layer. There are no images on the back, so I'm always happy when I get to use these markers. The brush end is pretty fine to get into those tiny little spaces, and I'm also noticing that the ink isn't bleeding as much as it does on like Amazon printed paper, which is nice. Not a whole lot of surface to shade, but I'm using a very light purple as the darkest shadow, and then a slightly darker skin tone from that base layer to blend the purple and the base layer together. And then I'll go over it all with the lightest one again. Tinkerbell has to have that golden yellow hair, so I'm starting out with yellow and then shading with more of this kind of greenish gold color to darken it up in the shadows. And then these colors will also be used in the center of the flower. Dark pink lips and some bright pink flowers for her top and headpiece. For her leaf skirt, I'm adding yellow at the ends of the leaves for the highlight, and then I'll move on to green and then a darker green for the shadow towards the top. I'm going to color the branch purple, and the leaves will be in different shades of light green and teal. The vine is going to be teal with some of the little trindles wrapped around will be a light green also. The smaller flowers are going to be a light teal color, and then the bigger flowers are going to be a light blue, almost like a periwinkle blue. For the wings, I'm using a really light blue and trying to shade around the black lines because eventually I want to white out the black lines. So I just need a little bit of color in here first. I'm also going to use a darker kind of yellow brown to shade inside these flowers. All right, and then on these lighter leaves, I'm adding just like a medium green to go on top and about, halfway down the leaf, just to add a little bit of shadow inside there. Now for some color pencil shading, I'm using a Prisma Color pencils, and this smaller vine is going to have a very subtle shading effect. I like these greens together. Everything else will have a darker shadow for contrast. For the thicker part of the vine, I'm using a dark teal, and then I'm just taking a blender pen and blending that out. So not even using like your normal three, light, medium, dark shades. For these smaller flowers, I'm using a slightly darker teal than the base layer, and then it will be dark towards the center, and then it will be lighter at the top of the petal. And just to brighten it up a little bit, using a white Prismacolor pencil and just going over some of those areas, adding a few little white lines just to give it some, flower petal highlights. All right, taking a darker purple color pencil and just creating a shadow down here at the bottom of this tree branch. And if those pencil lines bother you, you can take a blender pencil and just blend that out. These larger flowers I'm shading with a darker periwinkle shade than the base, and I'm starting more at the top and then working it lighter as it gets more towards the center. So, and then blending that out with a very light blue. All right, and as I was coloring those flowers, I realized I forgot or didn't see her arm right there. It must have looked like the pillow when I was coloring her skin, so I'm just going to quickly fill that in. All right, continuing to add some shadow inside these wings. This is a very light purple. Okay, it is oil pastel time, so I did use some painter's tape to help protect that other side of the paper. And I'm using this brand Gallery Oil Pastels by Mungyo, I believe is how you pronounce it. They seem to be very popular with artists and colorists on YouTube, so I thought I would give these a try, and pretty reasonably priced, and then you get a lot of colors. So I'm going to be using a dark navy and then a darker blue, a light blue, and I'm even going to add a purple in there too. I'm also using a Gamsol odorless mineral spirits, and I'm just pouring that into, well, a little shot glass, mainly because it's like the perfect size. And then I'm using a little small pointed brush. This will help spread those oil pastels to those tight spaces. All right, and then I also have a cheap like dollar store cutting board, and this is to kind of rub with the oil pastel on, and then use the paintbrush to pick it up and put in those little areas. Okay, so I apologize. I obviously was not recording when I colored the oil pastel in. So I basically just took that blue shade first, colored it in the area I wanted to, added some purple, and then I did the sides in that dark blue. And then used that lighter blue to kind of come around the fairy for a glow effect. If you notice, I do not go right up to the images. It looks kind of like a sticker border around all the leaves and stuff. And that's because, well, these are not pointed and it's really hard to get into those little tight areas. So that is why I use the Gamsol to kind of help blend that in. So yeah, there's a pretty thick layer. I haven't played around too much. I did that one first page, but that's really all I've done in oil pastels. So I start with this coverage, and then if I need to add more, then I can add more. For me, I think I like to use my finger to blend it. I keep trying other ways, but the finger seems to work the best. I do have to use a harder pressure, and I'm starting in the lighter area and working towards the darker. All right, as you can see, there is some white kind of still showing through on the page, which I'm actually okay with because I'm going to be splattering it with white paint anyway, so a little bit of that will be okay. I can also, when I'm blending some of this, I can kind of help cover that up too. All right, so I dip my brush in the Gamsol and I wipe off the excess. It really does go a long way. And then I just pick up around the heavy part of that line, and then kind of move it and push it into those tight areas. All right, and then to use the cutting board, let me show you down here at the bottom where these leaves are. This is the area where I had the hardest time trying to get into some of those areas. So I just scribble some of the color, the oil pastel, on the cutting board, and then I dip my brush in the Gamsol, and then I pick up some of the color on the cutting board and just brush it on like paint. It is really so easy, and the color is just about a perfect match. Once it dries, I notice it does dry lighter, so if you wanted any of that like glowy look, that would be perfect. But if you don't, if you want it to be a better match, I'll show you how I fix that later on with color pencil. You could also do multiple layers, which I do in some cases, but yeah, for this one, I had already sprayed it with the fixative and didn't want to go back when I noticed that it was still light. So anyway, that's why I use color pencil on top. Okay, so here is the finished background with the oil pastels. I think it looks so pretty and is exactly what I pictured. I did go ahead and spray it with Krylon's Workable Fixative. It's the only fixative I have right now, but it seems to work just fine. It gives a nice sheen to the page. And just to make sure it works, I rub my finger over the top and check to see if there is any blue on my finger. If there is, then I just go spray it again. I actually should have waited for this step until after I did the next step, but I was just trying to keep my hands clean. And since it's a workable fixative, I didn't think there would be an issue with the water brush, but the colors didn't go on as nicely as they should have. So lesson learned on that. Wait until after the watercolor. All right, so I'm going to be using some Tombow markers, and I'm just going to rub them on this little plastic sheet here and pick them up with a water brush. This is going to be for all those blankets and pillows that she is laying on, because remember, I want that kind of low saturation feel to those blankets. I now want a little heavier shading in between those pillows and shadows from her leg, even drop shadows like around the flowers. So I'm going to use alcohol markers for this, and there's just a light and a medium gray. Now to fix these lighter areas around the leaves. I just tried to match my color pencils as close to the blues as possible. There is a slight color difference, but I can try to camouflage those with stars. All right, and now I'm taking a light blue and just trying to enhance that glow a little bit. I can even add some little squiggly lines outside of that main glow line just to kind of help ease those colors so it's not such a harsh line. For this next part, I'm adding some white acrylic paint splatters for stars. I don't want to get any on the image, so I'm taking tracing paper and cutting a piece out that will cover up the image. Thankfully, it's all in one spot and not spread out like some of the other flowers in this book. All right, adding a little bit of paint and a lot of water to make a very watery little puddle here. And then using my brush, picking up that watery paint and just trying to get a good consistency that will, not disappear on the page, but also be able to be flicked. And then I just kind of bend the brushes back and let them flick out. All right, so let's take this off and ooh, look how pretty that is. I like that some are small and some are a little bit bigger. It creates a very natural looking starscape. All right, I'm going to be using some white acrylic paint pens for more stars, and this will just add a little bit bigger stars so we get more depth. And then I also want to create some little sparkles, or not sparkles, but like fairy dust area around the fairy also. I normally use Posca, that always seems to work best for me, but I was watching Sarah Renee Clark's videos and she seemed to like this Artistro pen set, which at first it didn't really work for me in some other pages that I was using. I seem to have to really shake up that ink. It seems to be working okay now, but before it was just really watery and it wouldn't go on top of hardly anything like color pencils, definitely not the oil paint. So I'm not sure if it's because I have the fixative on here that it's going on better, but yeah, I wasn't really happy with it, so sometimes I'll just use the Posca. All right, now I'm outlining over the black lines in the wings. Hopefully I have enough shading in there. I can always come back and add more if I need to. All right, continuing with these little finishes here, I am using Ohuhu paint markers, and these are, you know, very similar to the Posca pens. I did pink inside the little flowers, and then some brighter yellows for highlights, green in the leaves. And I started to do white on these leaves and I didn't like it, so I'm gonna let those dry and do some darker green. All right, well, I'm finally at the last step, and that's to add just a little bit of sparkle. This is by Sakura Gellyroll and is the Stardust Clear. I'm just going to go over the lines and the wings and maybe add a few little bits in her hair. All right, let me bring this up closer to you so hopefully you can see all the sparkles in there. All finished, and here are my final thoughts. I think I did achieve the concept of highlighting or putting emphasis on the fairy. I think mainly that is due to the high contrast of the dark background and very white glowy wings. Adding that pop of pink in her top and hair also helps keep the eye moving to her. The yellow really stands out against the cooler tones of the color palette, and I think I may have found a new favorite background medium. Oil pastels, yes. Well, that is it for today. I hope you enjoyed and this has inspired you. Please check out the very talented colorist on YouTube, A Cluttered Life, to see her work and work in this book, and check out Denyse Klette's Instagram. Her paintings and her sculptings are amazing. All right, everyone, thanks for watching. See you next time.